The World Series is over. The less said about that, the better. And the offseason is officially upon us. The Giants didn't have a GM coming into the day, but we hear today they've got their guy.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kasbeck, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show since just prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And coming up on today's show, first of all, to get it out of the way, this has not been a daily show for a few weeks now, and I really do apologize for that. I've had personal things going on, and hopefully not too far down the line, it's going to return to normal. So I just wanted to point that out, but this news happened to be coming at a good time for me to be able to record this show today. And so the World Series ended yesterday, so the offseason starts today. That we've already seen a trade. Jorge Soler, back on the move, gets sent to the Angels. Ironically, the brother of the Angels general manager or president of baseball operations, I'm not sure which, is Perry Minasian, and his brother is the new Giants general manager, according to Bob Nightingale, and sources confirming to the likes of Shayna Rubin of the San Francisco Chronicle. I don't recall if Pavlovich and Baggerly confirmed, but it seems all but certain this is going to be announced here. Bob Nightingale says the San Francisco Giants are expected to announce Friday that Zack Minasian is their new GM. Minasian's promotion makes the Minasian family the first to have two brothers as GMs at the same time in MLB history, with Perry as the Angels GM. So I know I just said I'm not sure if he's the president of baseball operations or GM in Anaheim, but Bob Nightingale could very well be wrong about what the title is. People get titles wrong all the time. People called Farhan Zaidi the GM. But the point is, Zack Minasian is the Giants' new GM. So who is Zack Minasian, and why do I think this is a really good hire? Like when I saw this, I was like, whew, sigh of relief that for the following reason. So Zack Minasian is a promotion from within. Now that wouldn't necessarily automatically relieve me. Why it relieves me is that, and hear me out on this, Zack Minasian was hired by Farhan Zaidi. It was one of the first hires that he made way back in 2019. And what was his role? He's been director of professional scouting. I've seen varying reports. Some have said he was vice president of professional scouting. I've seen it written different ways, so maybe I should check the Giants website for his official title, but it'll probably now say general. Actually, it probably won't say general manager. I'll try to pull that up as I'm kind of speaking here, but the fact is that the reason I think that it's a good thing that Buster Posey, in his first high-profile move, really his first move at all that we've heard of, hired someone who was hired by Farhan Zaidi. And why do I think that? Because there were good things about the Farhan Zaidi-led regime, and the good things were essentially, like, a lot of the stuff was pro scouting stuff. If in fact Minasian, like, we don't know the extent to which Zack Minasian had, his hands on the likes of acquiring or targeting LaMonte Wade Jr. and Mike Yastrzemski and continuing to look through, Gerard Encarnacion. I'm not going to call him Gerard. There's no way that's how you pronounce that in Spanish. It's Gerard Encarnacion, who had an impressive season coming out of the independent leagues. Impressive in some ways. And let's see. I mean, and some of the free agents that they signed, right? Like Kevin Gausman and Carlos Rodon and Jordan Hicks. And I mean, I'm trying to think back to previous seasons as well. Tyro Estrada. So a lot of these kind of minor acquisitions where basically the Giants saw something in players that other teams didn't see. Now, I know a lot of you are probably ready to pull your hair out hearing me say this and thinking it's just more of the same. But I think it's different because what you have is Buster Posey at the top. So you have that maybe grander vision. You have that someone who's a lot more in touch with the kind of players, and the importance of creating, you're going to see less probably roster churn and stuff like that, and DFAs and waiver claims and then DFAs and stuff like that. And then also the vision for what is Giants baseball and kind of maybe because it doesn't take a genius to say Juan Soto is great is even an understatement. Juan Soto is a superstar baseball player, right? Like anybody can recognize that. And I think a Buster Posey gives you, perhaps more. Maybe Soto's not the perfect example because there's, certainty that Zaidi would have been interested as well. But, I think Posey's going to be able to kind of implement a vision and just kind of understanding how the pieces fit together and kind of seeing, what pieces are needed. What, do we need to make a big move here? Do we need to be bold here? Do we need to whatever it is, whether it's make a move, don't make a move, stand pat, whatever. Posey's there for that, and also his own baseball expertise. And Minasian, though, you don't want, this was one of the things I was worried about them giving up was their, the one thing that they were really good at, which was these minor moves where basically, they got all of these guys for nothing. And no, none of them really have become superstars, except I would argue, you could make an exception for a Kevin Gausman and Carlos Rodon, who ended up getting $100+ million contracts after coming to the Giants on much smaller deals. And Gausman in particular, was coming off a rough season and was signed to a 1-year $10 or $8 million deal. And so pro scouting definitely goes into that decision. How much of Minasian's input was made on each of these moves, I don't know. But this was the one area where they really excelled was unearthing undervalued talent. And so you need that. The Angels are a perfect example in that they had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, and yet they were a below 500 team and never once made the playoffs under Ohtani. When Ohtani was there. Why? Because they didn't have that supporting cast. And so you need the supporting cast, and then you also need the impact talent on top of that. And, amateur scouting is a whole different thing. And so maybe they make a change at that level. But Minasian being promoted here doesn't speak to if there's going to be a change in amateur scouting. And so that would be having to do with the draft and, high school and college and independent league players. But pro scouting has to do with, all major leaguers and all minor leaguers. Anyone in professional affiliated ball, Minasian knows, and, the Giants have a good track record, especially when you look at the likes of a LaMonte Wade and a Mike Yastrzemski, and I get it, they weren't superstars, but these other teams did not see in them what the Giants did, and they've been productive, if not great, but solid MLB players. So anyway, more about this and what I think is to come for the Giants and kind of getting you set for the offseason as it is now here, coming up in just a minute and before we get into it. Today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Game Time. I love going to MLB games all season long, but particularly in the playoffs. This year, I was lucky enough to go to one playoff game. It happened to be one of the more memorable ones in Milwaukee with the clincher, the decisive wild card game, Game 3, with Pete Alonso homering in the ninth off of Devin Williams. And speaking of the Brewers, that's where Minasian was before coming to the Giants. We'll discuss that as well. But Game Time made the ticket buying experience just so much better for me. From panoramic images of your seat, which is huge when going to a venue you've never been to before, to the Game Time guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, as promised, more about the Giants hiring Zack Minasian. It's a report at this point. It's not officially been announced by the Giants, but there's no reason to believe this is not going to be true. And hopefully we get a press conference. Hopefully we get, Buster Posey's opinion on why Minasian was the choice. I'd like to know who they interviewed. It was largely kept under wraps. That was, I expect that to be a hallmark of this Buster Posey era, second Buster Posey era, this one in a very different capacity. But he was hush-hush as a player, never really revealing much. And I would expect, unfortunately for us in the media, that's going to be the case again, if not more so here with him as president of baseball operations. But anyway, thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Again, I recognize this has not been every day lately. I am hoping that changes and hoping that we'd get a press conference tomorrow when the Giants are expected to announce this. Obviously, they should give media some warning before a press conference, but I would be surprised if they did a press conference on the weekend, and coming up are the GM meetings. And so the quicker they do this, the better. But the fact is that Minasian is expected to be the Giants' new general manager. And so, yeah, I spoke of his time with the Brewers, and I think that's really significant to point out because, first of all, he was hired, I think, was he 27, 37? I think he took on a significant role with the Brewers in his 20s, and he was there for something like 14 years or 11 years. I forget exactly what it was, but he was there a long time in a significant role under a couple of different heads of baseball operations, including David Stearns. And the Brewers have been a team that has had a lot of success over the last decade plus, despite, pretty limited resources. And, so I'm not saying the Giants should be one of those teams. What they need is a combination of both. Like the Dodgers just won the World Series yesterday. And when everything changed for them, it was when they hired Andrew Friedman away from the Tampa Bay Rays. And the Tampa Bay Rays are like a team that doesn't spend a lot of money, and yet they're consistently good. And what that was a combination of a big market team in the Dodgers bringing in the mind from a small market team. So like the brains that it took to win with less, and then you bring that over to a team that has more, and what you get is what the Dodgers have been for the last decade plus. That was the hope with Farhan Zaidi. So this is a different dynamic here where they're going more like, I don't know. We don't know. When I've been able to podcast the last few weeks, it's largely focused on how there's a lot of uncertainty around how this will all play out with Buster Posey. Like, it's one thing if you're bringing in a known commodity, like even Farhan Zaidi. Like I had an idea about how that was going to go. It did not go how I thought it was going to go. I thought the Giants would become much more like the Dodgers are now, but that did not play out at all. And so with Posey, I think at the top there, you have like a vision setter and someone who ultimately has ultimate authority to make the calls on what the team needs and will be very plugged in and with the team. And what do they think they need, and what do they need to feel supported from a personnel perspective? Like, what does Logan Webb think that this team needs? What does Matt Chapman think that this team needs? Posey's going to care more about something like that. And he's also possibly going to be perhaps a more effective recruiter given his background as a Hall of Fame level player. And also players will recognize that, a lot of players are not thrilled with the way the game has shifted away from like a player-centric model, and like front offices have become more and more separate and detached and like out of touch with players, and perhaps they have no high-level playing experience at all. That's pretty common. But obviously Posey has high-level playing experience at the highest level, like MVP, 3 World Series, Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year twice, Gold Gloves, Silver Sluggers, you name it, he's got it. And so if you're a player and you're like, if I come to the Giants, like the guy running the show is someone who understands what it means to be a player, is going to care about the players in a way that it's hard to care if you didn't play the games and strap on, the shin guards like he did. Everybody knows who Buster Posey is. And so there's an instant credibility there. And I did have questions about, like, I thought this GM hire would be really important. And to me, I think that they did a good job. That being said, I don't know Zack Minasian personally at all. Like, he was very behind the scenes. Like I said, I don't know how much of it, like, was it him who was like, LaMonte Wade Jr. is the guy we should target? Was it him who said Mike Yastrzemski is the guy who they should target? They got these players for nothing. And they came with like many years of really cheap team control. And so when you have useful players under team control for like 5 or 6 years and owed small salaries because of the way rookie contracts work, and then you supplement that roster with more impact talent, like you can't just have high paid free agent impact talent at every position on the field. Because if you think about it, $20 million a year, say, if you just have 10 players at that, you're at a $200 million payroll, and you got a 26-man roster. So imagine 20 players on making $20 million a year. You're at a $400 million payroll, and that's just not how the Giants will not be spending at that level. If they pay $200 million, that would be a positive outcome, and we should be happy about that, given they, for a lot of years, were in the 160 range, and just this year they finally went and spent above $200 million, which didn't work out, by the way. But still, nonetheless, you got to have these diamonds in the rough. And you also need to scout. You need to draft and develop better. And so that's a whole separate thing. And it could be that changes are made there. I don't know. Also, by the way, this is kind of random, but Pete Patella was the Giants general manager, and I fully expected that Pete Patella would move on to be replaced as GM. Like, it's not something you usually want to do, to get demoted, essentially. I know someone who has worked with Pete Patella and claims that he's, a genius and just very highly thought of in the industry. And to take him off of the GM role, I just figured there would be plenty of opportunities for Pete Patella elsewhere, and that he would probably take those opportunities, and he still might. But it's worth pointing out that in this story from Maria Guardado of sfgiants.com about Pete Patella, she writes, Minasian will replace Pete Patella, who served as Zaidi's GM for the last 2 seasons. Patella is expected to remain with the organization, but will take on a different role now that Posey is calling the shots. I mean, it's more like he'll take on a different role now that Minasian is the GM, and obviously Patella is not. But keeping Patella, I think, is another win, because I agree with my friend from everything I've heard that Pete Patella, like, especially when it comes to development, like physical development, getting guys on the best possible strength training programs, just whatever tailored to their needs so that they can be the best versions of themselves, like physically. I think, and then also with pitchers, keeping them healthy and getting them in like workout routines or whatever that keeps them healthy and effective. My understanding is Pete Patella was just hugely instrumental in the success of the Astros during their run of success that they've been on for a number of years now, even post, trash can gate. So keeping Pete Patella would be, I think, great. And then promoting Zack Minasian, I think, is great. If they were to go, like some of the names mentioned, like Dayton Moore, who was formerly running the Kansas City Royals and has a scouting background, because we all knew, Posey said it, he wanted someone with a scouting background. That I would not have come on here and been enthusiastic about at all. I would have said, the ship is sinking. I would have said, I don't expect this to go well. But I'm saying quite the opposite here. I think it's a really nice compliment to Posey, because Posey's not going to be satisfied with, like, if you're thinking this is just more of the same, kind of small moves, LaMonte Wade Jr., Mike Yastrzemski, Tyro Estrada, and like that's kind of the direction of the team. I don't see it that way at all. I think Posey understands, like he's talked about, we're in the memory making business, and he talked about, I don't know, he's just, I think, clearly more in touch with what direction this team needs to go in. Clearly was deeply dissatisfied with the product on the field, but you still need those kind of undervalued, underappreciated guys, and the Giants were as good as anybody at finding them during Zaidi's tenure, and Minasian very well may have had a significant role in a lot, if not all, of those moves. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, we will preview the offseason, basically the month of November. And so we'll get into that in just a minute. And before we do, all right, as promised, we're going to get into the offseason calendar. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. When it is every day, it normally is. It's just not, I've not been able to do so for a few weeks, and I apologize to the listeners, and I thank you for bearing with me throughout this time. Really happy to be able to get this episode out today on the day that we learn of the Giants' reportedly making a decision on who their GM is going to be. And I can't wait until we hopefully find out some more about who they interviewed and why they chose Minasian, and hopefully hear from Minasian and how much of an impact they expect him to make, because Posey himself is not someone with front office experience. And so Minasian's going to be doing a lot, in like maybe more than the typical GM, and also maybe some assistant GMs get hired. So we'll see. But I just like, not just, if they just completely rid themselves of anything Farhan Zaidi, just out of, I mean, I don't think they would do it out of spite or like resentment or whatever. I think a lot of fans might make that call if they could. But no, it's recognizing what was good and retaining that. And so that's why I'm pleased. So previewing the offseason starts today, but there's what is known as this quiet period, where teams can only negotiate with their own free agents. And so that includes Blake Snell. Like, the Giants can be talking to Blake Snell right now, and other teams cannot. Players and teams have 5 days after the World Series to make decisions on options. And so for the Giants, it's mostly player options that are going to affect them here. So there's a $30 million player option for Blake Snell. He is going to decline that because he's going to make way more than that as a free agent re-entering the market. And there is a $3.5 million player option for Wilmer Flores, which I would expect him to pick up given the season he just had and the injuries that he dealt with. And then if he declines it, which I don't think he will, the Giants have an $8.5 million club option, and I would expect that to be declined because 8.5 is steep for, like I just said, given the year he just had, given the injuries that he had. Robbie Ray, I didn't mean to skip over that one. I should have said that one second, but has 2 years and $50 million that he can opt out of or opt into. And I would expect him to opt in. I'm not complaining about that. I think having Robbie Ray just kind of locked in and on your staff is a good thing. This guy won the Cy Young Award not that long ago, and was coming off Tommy John. Didn't make a lot of starts this year. I think he made 7. Some were really good. And having him for 2 years, $50 million, is maybe slightly inflated, but they got rid of, you got to keep in mind, they got rid of Mitch Haniger and Anthony DeSclafani in that trade where they got Robbie Ray. So there was money moving both ways. And so it kind of offsets some of the cost to Robbie Ray, because Mitch Haniger, he's still got another year left on his deal with now the Mariners. And he, by the way, had another bad season. So those option decisions have to be made in 5 days. And so we'll know officially, really, Robbie Ray and Wilmer Flores are the only two to really watch out for. They can be made sooner. A bunch of players have already made their decisions on options. And so we've already learned the fate of a bunch of players declining or picking up player options. And teams can do the same. And it's also the deadline to give the qualifying offer, which is the average of MLB's 125 highest paid players. This year, that number is $21.05 million, according to MLB. And thankfully, for the first time in a while, the Giants don't have any qualifying offer candidates. Like none of their free agents is going to get the qualifying offer, so we don't have to worry about this. They could, however, be interested in signing players who receive and reject the qualifying offer, which has penalties. And they did that with 2 players this last offseason, with Matt Chapman and Blake Snell. So they can't give one to Blake Snell because he's ineligible, but otherwise they would. Michael Conforto is a free agent. Mark Canha is a free agent. Kurt Casale is a free agent. And that's all, folks. That's all from their list of free agents. I guess technically Tyro Estrada has already declared minor league free agency, and so that's worth pointing out as well. So we won't have to worry about the Giants issuing any qualifying offers, but they're definitely going to be interested perhaps in some players who receive and reject one, such as Juan Soto, Corbin Burns, Anthony Santander, Max Fried, Willie Adames. And then the GM meetings are November 4th through 7th in San Antonio. And so I figured they would have a GM by then. And that's Monday through Thursday. So that's what I'm saying. If they're going to have a press conference, you'd expect it to be tomorrow. Maybe they don't have a press conference. Maybe he just meets with the media in San Antonio. I don't know. But then on the 19th of December, by the way, 5 days after the World Series, also free agency opens up. That quiet period is over, so you can negotiate with any players, not just your own free agents. So that's key as well. So you could sign Juan Soto in 5 days. That it doesn't play out that way ever, but theoretically, like you say, here's $2 billion for 1 year. Like, he would take that deal. But it's just open, but it won't happen. But you could see a smaller move, and trades can happen anytime now. By the way, they can happen today, and we already seen some. November 19th, the Giants must add players to the 40-man to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. Players who are eligible, if they want to protect them, they have to add them to the Rule 5 draft. And then November 22nd, they have to make tender decisions, and their tender decisions are Mike Yastrzemski, LaMonte Wade Jr., Tyler Rogers, and Camilo Doval. We will preview that in more detail as it comes up, but basically they have a kind of estimated salary, and the decision is at approximately that salary, do you want to bring them back? And the salary will be to be determined. You can negotiate it ahead of time, by the deadline, or you can wait and kick it down the road until January, and it could go down to a hearing in kind of a worst case scenario. And then the winter meetings are a little later this year, December 8th through 11th in Dallas. So that's as far as I'm going to go out. But yeah, the big news of the day, the Giants reportedly have made a decision, and Zack Minasian is going to be their GM. It gets a thumbs up from me. I just like that they're not ridding themselves of the good things of the Farhan Zaidi era. And by all accounts, Zack Minasian is really good at what he does. Brewers had success when he was there, and Giants have had success at professional scouting, I would say, when he's been here. Not landing superstars doesn't reflect at all on professional scouting. Now, yeah, you can point to some signings like Michael Conforto and I don't know who else comes to mind, Jorge Soler, but they've had a lot of success with the littler moves, and then also a lot of pitchers too. Like Kevin Gausman is the one who jumps off the page the most. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you, hopefully tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.